Hey everybody, it's Mrs. Sullivan, and today we're going to do a quick review over experimental design before you jump into planning your investigation of Algor Mortis. So, when we are talking about a scientific experiment, the first thing we're going to do is our experiment is going to answer a question. And so we need to know what that question is. So, for today, where we're planning an investigation about the cooling of the body and what factors can influence that is you are going to change it to how does a specific factor of your choice affect the rate of cooling of the body. So you could choose clothing, you could choose the temperature, you could choose if it's in water or wind, and many more. And so you're looking at a factor that affects the cooling of the body. All right. So if we are setting up an experiment where you have this question, you are going to come up with and your answer to that question is going to be the hypothesis. So the hypothesis equals what you think the answer will be to that question. But a good hypothesis is going to have both the independent and the dependent variable. So I shared with you a couple lessons ago about dry mix. So I'm going to change my color here. So dry mix is an acronym that I use to help remember what variable goes with each thing, and if I had to graph it, where it would go. So the dependent variable is the one that responds to what you change. And then if you were graphing this, which we will eventually, it's going to go on the y-axis. And then whichever variable or whatever you manipulate or you change, that is going to be your independent variable. And then when we're graphing this later in our analysis, it's going to go on the x-axis. So for our experimental design, you are going to need to identify what your independent and your dependent variables are. You're also going to have to identify some controls. So controls are what we keep constant so that we know that what was changed is the reason why our results change. So only one thing can be changed. So you should think of several things. So making sure you have the same equipment could be part of this. So you can list that out. The same like body size, if we're talking about this, unless that's what you're measuring. So anything that's going to be kept the same so that the only thing being experimented on is what you intended it to be. So another quick reminder about a hypothesis is that your hypothesis needs to be written as an if-then statement. So hypothesis, you are going to say if we do something. So if we change something, so the manipulated variable, then what is going to happen to our dependent variable? So if the body is in a windy place, then the rate of cooling will increase or decrease. So this should be something about what does it do to the rate of cooling? So what does it do to the rate of cooling? So then in an experimental design situation, you also need to identify what your materials are going to be. So I'm going to conduct this experiment for you all. I'm going to choose what many of you come up with. So I won't do every experiment, but I'm going to choose one of the factors that you're testing, and we'll actually run that lab during class. And so we're going to be using a LabQuest, which is just a computer that is able to measure it with a temperature probe. So we'll be able to measure the constant change of the temperature of your body. I am not going to give us real bodies of humans or animals for this. We are going to use a test tube body. So in your procedure, you are going to have a test tube body that is made of a water lock. And what this is it is like a gel that I can, like, it's hydrated with water, it warms and it maintains its temperature for a period of time, kind of like a body would, and it would react the same way that a body would to our conditions. So I want you to list any additional materials that you would need. So if you chose clothing, you would need to say that there were little tiny clothes or fabric to wrap around your test tube body in order to do this experiment. If you're talking about the wind, you would need a fan. If you're talking about heat or cold, you would need either like hot water or cold water that we could warm it up in ahead of time, etc. So you are coming up with that list of any additional supplies that we need. The last thing that's kind of weird is when we are writing a procedure in science, the procedure is really supposed to be like it already happened. So writing a good procedure needs to be in the third person, which means no one is really mentioned. It's going to be kind of mysterious. It just happened. And it's going to be in the past tense, like it's already occurred. So instead of saying like what you would think, you'd say, pour the water. Okay. This is not in the past tense. So instead, we would say, the water was poured. Okay. So for each thing that you do, we're going to break it down into this past tense. It's also called the passive tense for my English friends here. And third person, meaning that no one is mentioned. So if it was first person, it would say, I poured the water. We're not doing that. Instead of, we're not saying you pour the water, we're just saying it was poured. And so we want to make sure that we're wording it this way because this is the proper way to write our procedures. If this gets really tricky for you, I can help you translate what you wrote out into this third past passive tense, but I want you to do your best to start out with that procedure. So this assignment is going to count as a summative grade because one of the core practices that you should be able to do by the end of the year is to plan an investigation. We're going to carry out that investigation a little differently this year because I'm going to be helping you do that. And then you are still going to be analyzing those results and drawing conclusions about how did that factor that you chose actually change the cooling of the body. So in our assignment on Canvas, you are going to make a copy of a template that has the starts of everything I just showed you, and you're going to fill in your information and then submit that Google Doc as your assignment. If you have any questions, please ask me in class or send me a Canvas inbox message or an email, and I will get back to you as fast as I can. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you soon.